Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story.
Maya Akafer climbed the last 200 steps of the ascent gate the way a person climbs stairs in their own house, without ceremony, without dread, without once looking up at the thing she was supposed to be afraid of. The mountain wind cut sideways across the stone, thin and cold, and full of the smell of old incense. Above her, the sanctum of the bound blade rose out of the rock like something the mountain had grown rather than something anyone had built. Its towers were pale and narrow. Its windows were small and dark. Every surface had been worn smooth by 4 centuries of pilgrims pressing their palms flat against it and whispering things they hoped were prayers. Maya pressed nothing. She kept her hands at her sides and her chin level and her breathing easy, and she reached the top of the steps looking like a woman who had come a long way to visit a building, which was exactly what she was. Warden Sale waited at the threshold with the stillness of his kind. The Vasari were a tall, hollow-boned people, descended from something that had once hunted from the air, and even now, generations into stone and ritual, they held themselves like creatures who could fall upward if they chose to. Sale's feathered crest lay flat and smooth along his skull, which among the Vasari signified calm. His long fingers were folded over a ceremonial staff. His round, fixed eyes tracked Maya's approach with the patience of a predator who had decided, long ago, that nothing on these steps was prey. "Initiate," he said. His voice had the dry, layered sound of 2 notes at once. "You arrive sanctioned." "Sanctioned and grateful," Maya said, and inclined her head a precise, polite degree. Sale's crest did not move, which was good. The crest was the tell. A Vasari's crest told you everything. Their face would not flat for calm, half raised for attention, fully flared for fear or fury. Sale stayed flat. He had heard 1,000 initiates say sanctioned and grateful asterisk in exactly that tone, and the phrase soothed him the way a familiar song soothes anyone. He stepped aside. "The threshold right first," he said. "You will bow to the inner hall. You will not look upon the door. The bound blade rests beyond it, and the unworthy gaze unbinds nothing but their own peace." "Of course," Maya said. She walked to the marked stone. Ahead of her, down a corridor of pale columns, stood the inner hall's door, a slab of dark metal so old it had stopped reflecting light and simply absorbed it. Pilgrims were meant to bow toward it deeply, foreheads low, eyes shut, the whole posture an apology for the crime of being near something sacred. Maya bowed. She bowed badly. It was not rude exactly. It was not a refusal. It was a bow the way a tall person ducks through a low doorway, functional, brief, and entirely without the trembling reverence the rite was designed to extract. Her spine bent perhaps 30 degrees. Her eyes did not close. They stayed open and level and pointed, with mild interest, straight down the corridor at the dark door she had just been told not to look at. She studied it the way you study a painting you have heard a great deal about, and are now slightly underwhelmed by. Then she straightened, and the bow was over, and she had technically completed the threshold rite. And she had also, in the eyes of anyone who understood what they were watching, committed something close to blasphemy in under 4 seconds. Sale had not been watching closely. Sale had been thinking about the wind. His crest stayed flat. "The rite is observed," he said. "You may pass to the pilgrim cells. The lay keeper will receive you." "Thank you, Warden." Maya stepped past him into the corridor of pale columns, and as she did, a second Vasari detached from the shadow of the nearest pillar where she had been standing the entire time. Warden Vrenna was smaller than Sale and older in a way that did not show in her body but showed in how little she moved. Her plumage was the gray of a struck match. Her eyes were the deep amber of the species, and they had been on Maya since the first of the 200 steps. She had watched the bow. She had watched the open eyes. She had watched the chin that did not lower, and somewhere under her sternum a hollow bone had begun, faintly, to ache. She fell into step beside Maya without being asked. "You bowed," Vrena said. "I did." "You bowed the way a person checks whether a chair is dry before sitting in it." Maya considered that. "That's fair," she said. "It was a practical bow." Vrena's crest rose. Not all the way. A finger's width, the posture of an animal that has heard a sound it cannot place, and has not yet decided whether the sound is a threat or only the wind moving something that should not have moved. Her amber eyes did not blink. The Vasari blinked rarely, and when they did it meant something, and Vrena did not do it now. "The threshold rite is not practical," she said. "It is reverent. The two are not the same. A practical bow is an insult wearing the shape of obedience." "I completed the rite as instructed," Maya said. Her voice stayed even, unhurried, faintly warm. Warden Sale observed it. He found it sufficient. Sale finds the wind sufficient if it stops bothering him. Then perhaps the standard is sufficiency, and I have met it. Vrena stopped walking. Maya took 3 more steps before she stopped too, turned, and looked back at the old warden with an expression of mild, open patience. The face of someone willing to stand in a cold corridor for as long as this needed to take, because she had nothing to hide and therefore nothing to hurry away from. That was the thing that unsettled Vrena most. Not the bow, the calm. Every initiate who arrived at the sanctum arrived afraid of the climb, afraid of the wardens, afraid above all of the dark door, and the thing behind it that 400 years of careful telling had built into a horror. Fear was the natural state of the threshold. Fear was, Vrena had always privately suspected, the asterisk point of the threshold. And this human woman, standing in the worn stone with her hands loose at her sides, was not afraid of anything Vrena could name. Vrena had no grounds. The initiate was sanctioned. The rite was observed. The bow, however shallow, had bent. There was no rule that measured the angle of a spine or the closing of an eye, because for 400 years no rule had needed to. Reverence had never had to be enforced. It had simply always been there, the way the mountain was there, and no one writes a law requiring the mountain to exist. Her crest sank slowly, back toward flat. Not because she was reassured, because she had nothing but a hollow ache under her sternum that was not evidence, and a feeling she could not file, and the worn columns of a corridor that suddenly seemed colder than the wind outside. "Go to your cell," Vrena said. "Thank you, Warden," Maya said, and went. And behind her the old Vasari stood very still for a long time, looking down the corridor at the dark door, trying to understand what she had just failed to stop. The pilgrim cells were carved into the mountain's living rock, a honeycomb of small bare rooms lit by recessed lamps that gave off a steady amber light, not unlike the eyes that had just watched Maya all the way down the hall. Each cell held a sleeping pallet, a shelf, a basin, and a small square window cut straight through 40 feet of stone to a view of nothing but sky. Tomas was waiting outside the cell they had assigned her, and Tomas, at least, was human. He was a broad, weathered man somewhere past 50, with gray stubble and a stoop he wore like a coat he had given up taking off. He had the look of a person who had been somewhere a very long time and had stopped expecting to leave. He carried a folded gray robe over one arm and a clay cup of something steaming in the other hand, and he offered both to Maya with the cup first, which told her most of what she needed to know about him. "Laykeeper," she said, taking the cup. "They told me you'd receive me." 41 years a laykeeper, Tomas said. Before that, 11 years a pilgrim who never left. Before that, he shrugged. Before that doesn't matter up here. Nothing before the mountain matters up here. That's the first thing they teach you and the last thing you stop believing. He looked at her with frank, tired curiosity. "You're the one Vrena's already worried about." "News travels. Up here, news is the only thing that travels. Everything else just stays." He nodded at the cell. "Sit." Drink that. It's bark tea and it's terrible and it's the only warm thing in the building, so people learn to love it the way people up here learn to love a great many things, because the alternative is the cold. Maya sat on the stone shelf and drank the tea. It was terrible. She drank it anyway. And watched the old man over the rim of the cup. And waited, because she had learned that men who had been somewhere 41 years would tell you everything if you simply let the silence do the asking. It took Tomas about a minute. "You want to know about the blade," he said. "I want to know why everyone's so frightened of a room," Maya said. Same question. They just sound different. He lowered himself onto the end of the pallet with the care of a man whose knees had opinions. The bound blade, the sacred weapon. The sanctum was built around it, not for it, around it, the way a pearl gets built around a piece of grit. 400 years ago someone or something brought it up this mountain, and the Vasari sealed it behind that door, and they have been guarding it ever since. Guarding it from what? From use. Tomas said the word the way other people say a curse. Not from theft, not from enemies, from use. The doctrine is that the blade holds power enough to unmake the sanctum and everything the sanctum protects, and that the only safe relationship a living thing can have with it is distance asterisk. You may climb the mountain. You may bow to the door. You may, if you are very devout and very lucky, be permitted into the inner hall during a vigil and kneel 10 feet from it with your eyes down. You may never, under any circumstance, in any age, for any reason, touch it. Has anyone? The old man went quiet. Outside the small square window, the sky did the slow, indifferent thing the sky does. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped, not for secrecy but for weight. Once, 80 years before I came, an initiate, they don't say his name, names are part of what they take from you up here, walked into the hall during a vigil and put his hand on it. Tomas turned the empty air over with one hand, a gesture that meant asterisk gone asterisk. The wardens say he was unmade, not killed, unmade, as though the act subtracted him from the record of having existed. There's no marker, no story, no cell that was his. There is only the warning, and the warning is him. This is what touching it does. It removes you from the world so completely the world forgets the shape of the whole. Maya set the empty cup down on the shelf with a small, deliberate click. "That's a very good story," she said. Tomas blinked. "It's not a story, it's doctrine." All the best doctrines were very good stories first. She said it without heat, without mockery, the way you might note that water is wet. 80 years before you came. No name, no marker, no remains. A man removed so completely no one can describe him, which is also, I'd point out, exactly what it would look like if a man had simply walked into a hall, touched a piece of metal, found nothing happened, and been quietly removed by people who could not afford for nothing to have happened. The old man stared at her. 41 years on the mountain had worn a great many things smooth in him, and one of them was the muscle a person uses to imagine the doctrine being false. It had been a long time since anyone had made him use it. It hurt, faintly, like a limb waking up. "Why did you come here?" he asked, and it was a different question than it had been a minute ago. Quieter, more careful. Maya looked at the small square of sky in the wall. She was a long moment answering, and when she did, her voice was as level and unhurried as it had been at the threshold. "Everyone on 3 continents is afraid of a room on this mountain," she said. "They've been afraid of it for 400 years. They've built their faith around being afraid of it, and in 400 years not one of them has gone in and looked." She turned the cup a quarter turn on the shelf, idle, thinking. "I wanted to see the thing everyone is so certain about. That's all. I just wanted to look at it with my eyes open." "That's not all," Tomas said. "Nobody climbs 200 steps to look." Maya smiled, small, warm, and entirely unrevealing. "Maybe not," she said. "It's still true. Both things usually are." And she lay back on the stone shelf and closed her eyes and slept like a person with nothing on her conscience, while the old lay-keeper sat at the end of the pallet for a long time, holding an empty cup and the unfamiliar weight of a question he had not let himself hold in 41 years. High Provost Aldrich came for her the next morning, and Aldrich was a different order of thing. Maya knew it the moment he entered the cell. Sale had been a closed door. Vrenna had been a tripwire. Aldrich was a lens. He came in without sound. The Visari moved without sound when they chose to, a leftover from the hunting their bodies remembered even when their lives did not. And he stood just inside the doorway and did not speak, and let his round amber eyes move across the cell the way a reader moves across a page he intends to remember. His plumage was the white of bone left in the sun. His crest was utterly flat, and Maya understood, watching him, that his crest would stay flat no matter what he felt, because a provost who had risen this high had spent decades learning to keep the tell from telling. The body broadcasts. Aldrich had learned to jam the signal. That made him the most dangerous thing in the building, and Maya, lying on the stone shelf, sat up slowly and gave him the courtesy of her full attention, because dangerous things deserved manners. Initiate Achafer, Aldrich said. The two-note voice in him was pitched low and even. I conduct the cataloging. Every initiate is recorded, origin, intent, disposition. The sanctum keeps no secrets from itself. I'd expect not, Maya said. He did not sit. He moved through the small cell instead, slowly looking at the shelf, at the basin, at the folded gray robe she had not yet put on, at the small square window and the angle of light it let in. He was not searching for an object. Maya recognized the method because it was her own. He was searching for the thing that did not fit. He was reading the room the way she read rooms, and a person who reads rooms can always feel when they are being read back. You climbed the ascent yesterday, he said, not turning. Warden Sale observed your threshold right. He recorded it as sufficient. A pause waited. Warden Vrenna recorded it as asterisk troubling asterisk. The two records do not agree. This is rare. The wardens of the threshold have agreed on the subject of nearly every initiate for a very long time. Perhaps I'm rare. Perhaps you are careless. He turned then, and the flat crest gave her nothing, and the amber eyes gave her nothing, and that absence of a tell was itself the loudest thing he could have shown her. I will tell you what Vrenna could not. I have read 4,000 initiates into this catalog. I have learned that the body confesses what the mouth defends, and I have noticed, Initiate Achafer, in the half hour since I entered this cell, that you have not once lowered your eyes. The cell was very quiet. You did not lower them at the threshold, Aldrich continued. You have not lowered them to me, and I am a provost, and initiates lower their eyes to provosts the way water lowers itself to the valley without being told, because the shape of the world requires it. You hold your gaze level at all times, including, and here his voice did not rise, did not sharpen, simply landed asterisk, down the corridor of pale columns, toward the door you were instructed not to look upon. You looked upon it. You are, I suspect, the kind of creature that looks upon everything. This was the near miss. Maya felt it arrive the way you feel a floor change from stone to ice through the soles of your boots. He did not have it, but he was one true sentence away from having it, and they both knew it, and the cell held its breath around the two of them. She did not flinch. She did not explain. She let a beat pass, let the silence sit there and grow heavy, the way she had let it sit with Tomas, because the silence was a tool and she was the only one in the room comfortable holding it. I keep my eyes level, she said at last, because I find that things behave better when they know they're being watched. People, animals, doors. A small pause. I meant no disrespect to the provost. Where I come from, lowering your eyes is how you tell something it has one. I haven't decided yet what's one here. It was, like every answer she had given since the steps, perfectly true and perfectly insufficient. It revealed a temperament and concealed an intention. It was a polished, well-fitted door with nothing behind it but more door. Aldrich studied her for a long, silent moment. His crest stayed flat. His eyes did not blink. And then, and this was the thing Maya filed away, the way Vrenna had filed her own ache, he chose, deliberately, asterisk not asterisk to press. She watched him decide it. She watched him stand at the very edge of the one question that would have ended this here, in a stone cell with a quiet removal and a 401st warning, and watched him step back from it instead. Not from doubt, from something colder and more careful than doubt. He did not yet have enough, and a provost who had read 4,000 initiates did not spend his single decisive question on a suspicion he could not yet prove. He banked it. He would spend it when it would land. "You will attend the Vigil of Witness," Aldrich said. "Tomorrow at the 3rd bell. All initiates of your intake will kneel in the inner hall before the bound blade with their eyes lowered for the duration of the rite. You will be observed." The faint, deliberate wait again. Closely. "I'll be there," Maya said. He moved to the doorway, soundless, and paused on the threshold of the cell, the way Vrenna had paused in the corridor. The posture of a creature filing something into a part of itself it would open later. "Initiate," he said, without turning. "Whatever you have decided you came here to look at, I would advise you to look at it with your eyes lowered like everyone else. A beat. The ones who insist on seeing everything tend to be the ones the sanctum has to make an example of." Then he was gone, without sound, and Maya sat on the stone shelf in the amber light and looked, with her eyes level and open, at the empty doorway where the most dangerous thing in the building had just chosen, for reasons of pure cold prudence, to let her live until tomorrow. The inner hall was smaller than 400 years of fear had made it in the mind. That was the first thing Maya noticed, kneeling in the 3rd rank of initiates on the cold floor at the 3rd bell. The hall was a plain chamber of dark stone, perhaps 40 feet across, lit by a ring of recessed amber lamps. There were no carvings. There was no gold. There was only the rank of gray-robed initiates with their foreheads low and their eyes shut, and the half-circle of wardens standing behind them, and at the far end, on a raised black slab, under a single shaft of light let down through 40 feet of mountain by a flue cut for exactly this purpose. The bound blade. It was a sword. Roughly. It was the length of a tall man's arm, dark gray, edgeless in the way very old metal goes edgeless, set upright in a stone cradle so that its point rose toward the light and its grip hung in shadow. It did not glow. It did not hum. It did not do any of the things 400 years of telling had promised it would do. It sat on its slab in its shaft of light and was, to the eye of a woman whose eyes were open, a piece of old metal in a quiet room. Around her, 50 initiates knelt with their faces pressed toward the floor, not daring to look at it. Behind her, Aldrich stood with his flat crest and his unblinking eyes, watching the back of her gray-robed head. Sale stood near the door. Vrenna stood at the edge of the lamplight, and the old gray warden's crest was not flat, it was up, a finger's width up, the way it had been in the corridor, because some part of her had known since the steps that this was the room it would happen in. The rite began. A warden Maya did not know intone the Vigil of Witness in the 2-note Vasari voice, and it was, stripped of its weight, a very long instruction to be afraid in an orderly fashion. You witness the bound blade. You do not approach the bound blade. You do not look upon the bound blade. You hold in your body the knowledge that distance is devotion and proximity is ruin. The initiates murmured the responses into the floor. The lamps held steady. The piece of old metal sat in its light and did nothing, because it was a piece of old metal. And Maya Akafer in the 3rd rank, with her eyes open, stood up. The sound of one person standing in a hall of 50 kneeling people is a very small sound and a very enormous one. A robe shifting, a knee unbending, a breath. The murmured response of the rite faltered in the rank around her like a struck chord losing its note. Somewhere behind her, the intoning warden's voice stopped on a syllable. The amber light did not change. The mountain did not move. There was only a human woman, standing in a room where standing did not happen, walking, calm, unhurried, her boots very loud on the dark stone, toward the raised black slab, and the thing no living creature had touched in 400 years. Initiate, Aldrich's voice cut the air, and for the first time it was not level. Stop. Maya did not stop. She crossed the hall, 50 foreheads came up off the floor because terror is stronger than instruction, and not one of them could keep their eyes down for this asterisk. Vrenna's crest snapped fully erect, every gray feather rigid, the hollow ache under her sternum finally, horribly, vindicated. Sail made a sound Maya had not known the Visari could make. And Aldrich moved, soundless and fast, the hunting body remembering itself, crossing the hall behind her. But he was 10 feet back and she was 3 feet from the slab, and there is a speed at which prevention simply becomes witness. Maya reached the raised black stone. She looked at the bound blade with her eyes fully open, the way she had looked at everything since the bottom of the steps. She reached out, without ceremony, without trembling, the way a person reaches for a tool, and she put her bare human hand flat around the grip of the sacred weapon. And nothing happened. Nothing happened so loudly that the silence of it rang. She was not unmade. She was not subtracted from the record of having existed. The mountain did not unbind. The lamps did not gutter. The world did not forget the shape of her. She simply stood there, a woman holding a piece of old metal, and the metal was light in her hand, far, far too light, lighter than that much steel had any right to be, and she felt it the instant her palm closed on it. The wrongness of the weight, and her eyes, open, level, seeing, went sharp. "Huh," Maya said into the ringing silence, turning the relic gently in the shaft of light. "It's hollow." The hall came apart. Not in fire, in faith. A warden near the door folded straight down onto the stone, legs simply gone out from under 400 years of doctrine. Initiates were screaming or praying, which up here had become the same sound. Sail had pressed himself flat against the wall with his crest flared so wide it scraped the stone, and Vrenna had not moved at all, frozen, every feather rigid, watching the impossible thing. The woman holding the sacred weapon, alive, unmade by nothing, asterisk examining it, with an expression that was no longer suspicion, and not yet anything that had a name. "Put it down." Aldrich had stopped 3 feet from her. His crest was up, his crest, the jammed signal, the tell he had spent decades silencing, was fully, nakedly erect, and the sight of it was worse to the wardens than the screaming. "Initiate Akafar, you have done the unforgivable thing. Put down the bound blade and explain yourself before I am required to do what doctrine requires." Maya did not put it down. She held it up into the light, turning it, her thumb running along a seam in the metal that should not have been there, her eyes doing the thing they had done in every room since the steps, reading, weighing, refusing to lower. "I'll explain myself," she said, perfectly calm in the wreckage of a religion. "But you're going to want to hear it standing up, Provost, because this is hollow, and it's been hollow the whole time, and I don't think this very long spoon is the thing you've actually been guarding. It is the bound blade, It's a asterisk casting," Maya said. "It's a shell of a sword poured around nothing and left here to be looked at, which means it was never the point. Nobody builds a fortress around a 400-year-old decoy unless the decoy is doing a job. So," she set the hollow relic back into its stone cradle with an irreverent little asterisk clack that made 2 more wardens flinch. "What's the real one? And don't tell me there isn't, because you've all been afraid of asterisk something for 400 years, and it wasn't this stick." And it was at that precise moment, the peak of it, the unforgivable act and the impossible survival and the Provost's bared crest, and the word stick still hanging in the holy air, that the deep bells began to ring. They were not the bells of the rite. The rite's bells were small and bright. These were the great foundation bells, set in the lowest part of the mountain 4 centuries ago and never, in living memory, rung vast, slow iron sounds that came up through the floor more than through the air, through the soles of the boots, through the bone. 3 of them, spaced and terrible. The wardens who had not yet fallen went still in a different way now. A way that had nothing to do with the woman and the relic. Sail came off the wall, his voice cracked on the 2 notes. "Those are the asterisk seal bells. Those have not rung in." He did not finish. He did not have a number large enough. Vrenna finally moved. The old gray warden crossed to a panel set in the dark stone that Maya had taken for decoration and was not, and pressed her long fingers to it, and read something in it, and her flared crest did the only thing left for it to do, which was tremble. "The foundation seals," Vrenna said, and her layered voice had gone very quiet, "are failing. The deep ones, the ones the old warnings named." She turned her amber eyes on Maya and on the hollow thing in its cradle, and the look in them was the look of a creature watching two facts she had refused to hold for 40 years arrive in the same room at the same time. "They are failing now asterisk." "Yes," Maya said. She had not moved. She was still standing by the slab with her hand resting, easy and unafraid, on the hollow relic she had been told would unmake the world. "I'd assume they've been failing for a while. Things that nobody's allowed to look at usually have been." Aldrich's crest was still up. He was looking at her the way the old man Tomas had looked at her in the cell, as a creature using a muscle he had not used in a very long time, and finding that it hurt, and finding that it worked. "Inner hall," he said, and it was no longer an accusation. It was the first order of the rest of his life. "All wardens, now, and bring," a beat, the smallest possible surrender, "bring the human who touched it." They convened in the deepest part of the sanctum, below the inner hall, in a chamber none of the initiates had ever been told existed, because the doctrine of distance had no room in it for a chamber you were supposed to enter. The great seal bells were still sounding, slower now, each iron note coming up through the stone and into the chest. The warden stood in a rough half-circle, sail with his crest still ragged, Vrenna gray and rigid. The fallen ones helped up and leaning, and at the center of it Aldrich, white-feathered, crest up, watching the human woman lay out the truth of their 400 years with the same calm she had carried up 200 steps. Tomas had come too. 41 years a lay keeper, and he had walked down into the forbidden chamber simply by following the woman who walked into forbidden things, and no one had stopped him, because the rule that would have stopped him had stopped meaning anything an hour ago. "Tell us," Aldrich said, "all of it. With the bells in our chests, initiate, do not be brief." Maya stood in the center of the half-circle with her eyes level, the way she had stood in every room, and told them. "Your doctrine is built on a hollow sword and a story about a man being unmade," she said. "I'll take the sword first. It's a casting. Old, deliberate, poured around empty space and finished to look solid. Nobody makes that by accident. Somebody made it asterisk on purpose asterisk 400 years ago to be the thing you would all look at. A decoy is only worth the labor if it draws attention off something. So from the moment I felt the weight was wrong. The only real question was what it was drawing your attention asterisk off." "The man," Vrenna said very low, "the one who touched it, 80 years before the laykeeper came. The wardens say he was unmade. The wardens say a man touched it and vanished so completely the world forgot his shape." Maya's voice did not rise. It did not have to. "That is also exactly what it looks like when a man touches it. Asterisk nothing happens, and the people who could not afford for nothing to have happened make him disappear and turn his absence into the warning. He wasn't unmade. He was the last person before me to learn the sword is hollow. And he was removed for learning it, and his removal was built into the doctrine as the proof that the doctrine was true." She let that sit. "The story isn't the evidence the touch is fatal. The story is what the fatal touch produces quietly by hand in a place like this one." A warden made a sound. Aldrich did not. His crest did not lower. He was, Maya saw, ahead of her now. He had been ahead since the seal bells, and what he needed was not to be convinced. What he needed was to hear it said aloud in a room, by someone unafraid, so that it became a thing the sanctum had spoken instead of a thing the sanctum had buried. "And the bells," Aldrich said, "finish it." "The bells are the rest of it," Maya said. "You built a fortress. You spent 400 years guarding the inside of a sword that doesn't have an inside. And every one of those years, the thing the fortress was asterisk actually built around the deep seals, the foundation work, Whatever the original warnings really meant sat under your feet, untouched, uninspected, unlooked at, because the entire architecture of your faith is that the sacred things are the ones you are forbidden to examine. She turned slowly, taking in the half circle of them, the bells still tolling up through the floor. You didn't fail to maintain the seals because you were lazy. You failed because maintaining them would have required someone to go down and look at them with their eyes open, and you spent 4 centuries training every soul on this mountain to never, ever do that. The reverence didn't protect the dangerous thing. The reverence is why the dangerous thing rotted. The chamber was silent except for the iron. It would have failed regardless, Vrenna said, not arguing, working it through aloud the way Tomas had in the cell. In a year, in 10, with no one watching, it would simply have failed one night and the mountain would have. Her crest sank finally all the way down, not in calm but in something heavier. And there would have been no warning because the only creatures who could have given a warning were forbidden to look. Yes, Maya said gently. It's failing tonight instead of some night with no one in the room. That's the only difference I made. I'm not the danger. I'm the thing that arrived in time to be looked at. Aldrich moved. He crossed to the dark panel in the wall, its twin to the one in the hall above, and laid his long white fingers against it. And for a long moment he read what it told him, the way he had read 4,000 initiates, the way he had read her cell. The bells tolled. When he spoke, his 2-note voice had found its level again, and it was the voice not of doctrine but of a provost doing at last the only job that had ever actually mattered. The seal works are reachable from this chamber, he said. They were always reachable from this chamber. The chamber was sealed by doctrine, not by stone. He turned. Sail. The maintenance schematics the old order kept and the new order forbade itself to read, they are in the deep archive. Vrenna knows the way. She has wanted to walk it for 40 years and forbidden herself the wanting. Take the lay keeper. He has been on this mountain longer than any of us and has spent 41 years noticing things we trained ourselves not to see. We have, perhaps, very little time. We will spend it looking. The wardens moved. Not in panic, in the strange, fast, coordinated calm of people who have just been given permission to do the obvious thing they were always able to do, and find that the doing comes easily because the only thing that had ever been hard was the permission. Sale went for the archive. Vrenna and Tomas went for the seal works, the old gray warden and the old gray man. 40 years and 41 descending together into a chamber both had been forbidden and both had, in their separate silences, always wanted to see. Maya went with them, because she was the only one in the building who had walked toward the forbidden thing on purpose, and there was, suddenly, a great deal of forbidden thing that needed walking toward. It took them most of the night. The deep seals were old and corroded, and 3 of them had failed past saving, but they were redundant built by an order 400 years dead who had understood, as the order that followed had not, that you do not protect a thing by forbidding people to look at it. You protect it by making sure many people always can. There were 9 seals where the doctrine had whispered of 1. 6 still held. The schematic sail carried up from the deep archive, written in a hand no living Vasari had been permitted to read, were not scripture. They were instructions. They were the patient, unsacred, entirely practical instructions of people who had wanted the mountain to last and had not, it turned out, wanted anyone to be afraid at all. By the gray hour before dawn, with Tomas's 41 years of noticing and Vrenna's 40 years of forbidden wanting, and a human woman who read rooms the way Aldrich read pages, the failing seals were braced. And the holding seals were cleaned, and the iron bells in the foundation, one by one, with a vast slow reluctance, went quiet. The mountain did not unbind. The world did not forget anyone's shape. It simply held, the way it had been built to hold by people who had never needed it to be sacred, only sound. They stood in the inner hall again at first light. The shaft of dawn came down the cut flue and landed where it always landed, on the raised black slab, on the hollow casting of a sword that 50 initiates had wept on the floor over the day before. It looked in the morning like exactly what it was, a piece of old metal in a quiet room. It had stopped, sometime in the night, being able to be anything else. The initiates were gone, sent down to the pilgrim cells, the vigil suspended for the first time in 4 centuries. The warden stood loose and exhausted and changed. Aldrich's crest was flat again, not jammed flat, Maya noted, but simply flat, the honest flat of a creature who had run out of things to brace against and found the lack of bracing survivable. By the doctrine, Aldrich said, you committed the unforgivable act. You touched the bound blade. There is a thing the sanctum is required to do to you, and it is the thing that was done 80 years before the Laykeeper came, and it is the thing that was done to make the warning. I know, Maya said. She had not lowered her eyes. She did not lower them now. The doctrine is hollow, Aldrich said. Like the sword. We poured 400 years around an empty space and called the space holy because the alternative was admitting we had never looked inside it. He turned his round amber eyes on the casting in its shaft of light. You will not be unmade initiate Akafir. You will be, I have not got a word for it yet. The old order would have had one. We forbade ourselves their words along with their schematics. A long pause, the bells silent under the floor, the dawn climbing the dark stone. There is a thing this sanctum has needed for 400 years and has been structurally incapable of permitting itself. A keeper of the true vigil. Someone whose entire office is to go down into the chambers we forbid and look at the things we venerate with their eyes open and tell us what is actually there. The office did not exist because the doctrine could not survive it. His crest stayed flat and steady, and that steadiness was the offer. It exists as of this morning. It is yours if you will hold it. You are uniquely unfit to be reverent and uniquely fit to be useful, and I have decided in the wreckage that I prefer the second thing. Maya looked at the hollow sword in the dawn for a moment. Then she walked over to it, in front of all of them, and put her bare human hand around the grip again. And not one warden flinched this time, which was the largest thing that had changed in 400 years and the quietest. I'll take it, she said. She hefted the casting, idle, the wrong light weight of it familiar now. Mostly because somebody in this building should be allowed to point at this and say what it is out loud. She turned it in the morning light. And what it is the most expensive, very long spoon ever made by anyone anywhere, and it has been sitting on a fancy rock terrifying 3 continents, and it could not even hold soup. There was a sound in the inner hall that the inner hall had, very possibly, never made. It came from the edge of the lamplight, from the old gray warden Vrenna, who had ached under her sternum since the bottom of the steps, and flared her crest in horror in this very room and walked 40 years of forbidden corridor in a single night, and who now, looking at the human holding the hollow sword and calling it a spoon, made a short, rough, astonished sound that none of the younger wardens recognized because none of them had been alive the last time she had made it. Vrenna was laughing. It was not graceful. 40 years out of practice, it came out of her like something dislodged. But it was unmistakable, and it cracked through the dawn-lit hall and broke against the dark stone, and Sale stared at her as though a wall had spoken. And Tomas, 41 years a laykeeper, 11 a pilgrim who never left, put his weathered hand over his mouth and his old eyes shone, because he had been on this mountain his entire adult life and had never once, not on any morning, heard a warden laugh. Aldrich's flat crest did not move, but something behind his amber eyes did, and Maya, who read rooms, read it. Director, he said, of the true vigil, your first duty is the deep archive. 400 years of things we were forbidden to look at. You will look at all of them. A beat, dry, and very nearly almost warm. With your eyes open, as I am given to understand is your single demonstrable talent. It's a good talent, Maya said, setting the hollow relic back in its cradle with the same irreverent little asterisk clack asterisk, the sound of a sacred thing being filed correctly at last. It's gotten me up worse mountains than this one. Outside, the sun cleared the ridge. and the light came full down the cut flue and fell across a quiet room, a piece of old metal, a half-circle of changed creatures, an old man with shining eyes, and a gray warden still, faintly, helplessly laughing. And the sanctum of the bound blade, which had spent 400 years on its knees before a thing it was forbidden to understand, stood up, for the first time into the morning, and found that it could.